Hey guys, tonight we step through the creaking gate of a medieval castle, not as the king or the queen, not even as a knight. No, you arrive in the scratchy woolen tunic of someone everyone forgets until they need their boots scrubbed or their firewood stacked. You squint as your eyes adjust. Stone walls rise around you like frozen waves, damp and worn but proud. You hear the scrape of a cartwheel on gravel, the lowing of oxen, and the sharp bark of a dog echoing down the inner bailey. A kitchen boy jogs past, sloshing soup from a heavy bucket. Behind him, a stable hand mutters curses under his breath as he drags a bale of straw toward the Lord's horses. And somewhere up in the turret, a nobleman is probably trying to decide whether to wear fur or silk to tonight's feast. You're trying not to slip on last night's fish guts. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this little sleepy history club travels. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step under the portcullis, and your nose curls. It's not a stench exactly, it's just medieval. Imagine the inside of a musty boot mixed with a barnyard roasted onions, old beer, and the whiff of wet wool after a storm. That's your first welcome into castle life. The drawbridge creaks behind you as it rises. Too late to turn back. Most visitors dream of romance, towering spires, tapestries waving in the breeze trumpets. But this place isn't Disneyland. It's drafty, crowded, and smells like hard labor. The first thing you notice is that the stone walls are alive with noise. Not voices exactly, though there are plenty of those. It's the clatter of tools, the flapping of chickens, the grunt of someone splitting firewood, and the rhythmic slosh of laundry being beaten near the well. Everyone's busy, and no one looks at you twice. You follow a path worn into the earth, lined with clumps of trampled grass and muddy footprints. Above you, banners hang from arrow slits limp in the still air. One is torn. Probably a falcon got at it. Or a drunk page boy with a dagger and no sense. Castles like this one weren't built in a weekend. Some took decades, generations even. They weren't meant to look pretty. They were meant to survive. Enemies, fires, winter, annoying cousins. This castle's great tower, what you'd call the keep, rises dead ahead. It's the high heart of the place, but don't expect velvet pillows and golden goblets. Even there, the windows are small, the staircases tight, and the air perpetually damp. Inside the outer walls is the bailey, a bustling open yard crammed with buildings that serve the real engine of the place work. Blacksmith, bakehouse, kennels, barracks. The smokehouse's chimney puffs away like a tired dragon. You pass by the well and see a boy hauling up a wooden bucket the size of his torso. He groans under the weight. Nearby, a woman crouches, washing potatoes in another basin of murky water. She glances at you, not unkindly, then goes back to scrubbing. You smell cabbage, and something else, maybe mutton. It's not unpleasant, but it's followed immediately by a gust of wind that carries something sharp and unmistakable: latrine fumes. Welcome to the balance of flavors in a castle. Historians still argue whether the average medieval castle was truly as filthy as modern imagination suggests. But when you've got 200 people limited plumbing and one poor soul cleaning the privy with a wooden paddle, you do the math. There's a rhythm here, a relentless, unglamorous choreography. Chickens dart between legs. A hound noses around a pile of scraps. A bell clangs once from the chapel tower, time for the midday meal if you're lucky. If you're not, time to move barrels. A man walks by carrying a pitchfork and whistling a tune with no rhythm. You catch a glimpse of his hands, cracked and calloused black under the nails. Castle life is many things, but gentle isn't one of them. You glance upward and spot movement along the battlements. 2 guards patrol leaning on their spears. They look bored. One scratches himself. No dragons today. Just the daily job of not falling asleep standing up. Still, this stone beast you've walked into has an aura, a weight. The walls have seen siege and celebration, betrayal and coronation. But you're not a royal guest here. You're just another body in the stream, another back to carry wood, another voice lost in the shuffle of hundreds. And yet, something about the place invites wonder. Maybe it's the way light filters through smoke, turning motes of dust into gold. Maybe it's the carved archway you pass that's chipped, but still proud. Maybe it's just that you've never stood inside something that old and still felt it breathe. You round a corner and nearly trip over a chicken. It scolds you with a squawk, offended by your presence. Honestly, that's fair. Back in the corner of the bailey, there's a boy napping against a barrel. His straw hat is tilted over his eyes, his mouth open. He looks like he's escaped time itself. Until a shout rings out. "Elliot, you were meant to clean the tack room." The boy flinches, scrambles upright, and stumbles off. No peace here. You press on, past the noisy forge, past the stables thick with flies, past a pig pen that might make you reevaluate bacon forever. The castle is a machine, big, dirty, alive. And the funny thing is, you're already a cog in it whether you like it or not. Still, something stirs in your chest, a strange kind of respect. Because even here in the muck and the chaos, someone built this. And someone keeps it going. Not the king, not the knight, but everyone else. You don't even make it 5 more steps before your senses are ambushed again. It's not the smell of food. That comes later. This is more aggressive. A hot, meaty stench that curls through the air like a snake and grabs you by the nose hairs. You look around trying to pinpoint the source. Spoiler alert, there isn't one source. It's everything. Everyone. Every corner of the castle is contributing its own unique flavor to the aromatic stew that is medieval daily life. The first culprit, sweat. Not polite gym sweat. We're talking unwashed tunics worn 3 weeks straight. Armpits that haven't seen soap since the feast of St. Bartholomew. And this isn't just one person. This is dozens of bodies all working, trudging, lifting, yelling, living. Now add to that the animals. There are pigs snorting in a pen just yards from the kitchen door. Chickens pecking at puddles that you pray are just water. Horses relieving themselves freely in the stables where straw and waste mix into a thick, sweet rot that clings to your boots. And then there's the mildew. It creeps along the inside of stone walls, particularly near corners where water leaks down the cracks after a rainstorm, which is often. Castles weren't waterproof miracles, they were cold, porous, and prone to soaking up the elements like a giant sponge made of sadness. Beneath all this, if you inhale slowly, and why would you? There's the background tang of the privy, the castle's personal answer to modern plumbing. Let's just say it involves gravity a-chute and the misplaced optimism of anyone who stands below it. It's said that medieval folk were used to this smell. Historians still argue whether people in the 12th or 13th century truly noticed the stench. Some suggest that their sense of smell adjusted, dulled by constant exposure. Others believe they just didn't have the luxury of noticing. When your day involves hauling stones or feeding pigs, your nose doesn't get a vote. Still, some tried to fight it. The noble classes, those rare few with coin to spare, carried little sachets of herbs: lavender, sage, rose petals. They tucked them into their sleeves or clutched pomanders, small perforated balls filled with sweet-smelling ingredients. Like carrying around a medieval Glade plug-in, if you will. But even the wealthiest couldn't escape the castle's olfactory personality. You pass a chamber where Russia's dried grasses scattered on the floor are being swept out and replaced. They were meant to absorb spills and smells, though by the time they were changed, the old ones often contained mold insect eggs and whatever food had fallen during last week's meal. The castle's layout doesn't help. There's no cross breeze in narrow stone hallways, no ventilation shafts, just pockets of air growing ever warmer, ever riper. And the kitchens. That's a different league entirely. We'll get to that in a bit. You walk under a low arch and into a storeroom where barrels are stacked to the ceiling. The scent here shifts fermented apples from the cider casks, salty brine from preserved fish, the vinegary tang of pickled turnips. You'd think the coolness of the stone would cancel it out, but nope. It's like all the scents have been slow cooked in the dark. One of the barrels leaks. The floor is sticky. A rat darts past your boot. Just another tenant doing its thing. A boy walks in behind you, balancing a tray with salted meat wrapped in cloth. He sneezes, violently drops the tray, and mutters something that sounds like a prayer and a curse wrapped together. You follow him back out, shaking your head. You catch a glimpse of the kitchens again. Their smoke curls from the wide hearth. It should smell like roasting meat, and to some extent it does, but it's buried under the constant haze of charred fat ash and the faint sour reek of something that probably spoiled 2 days ago. Let's not even talk about where the scraps go. Actually, let's. Straight into the yard for the dogs and pigs and crows, a kind of organic recycling program, minus the sanitation. Oh, and the drains. If the castle has them, they're just grooves in the stone that funnel waste outside. Or near the outside, you hope. When it rains, everything flows, including things you'd really rather not flow. There's a funny side to all this. Some visitors, wealthy ones from distant lands, wrote letters complaining about the smell. One chronicler from 14th century Italy compared English castles to cheese rinds fermenting in a poor man's boot. Harsh. But honestly, kind of fair. And yet, people lived here. Not just lived, thrived. Grew up. Fell in love. Raised families. Laughed over meals. Which tells you something about the human nose. And the human heart. Even here where the air tastes like pig sweat and dried onions. there's a rhythm of life that refuses to apologize. You pass a group of women gathering herbs in the courtyard garden. One snips marjoram, while another plucks wild mint. They're not nobles, just workers trying to make stew taste like something other than defeat. You notice one of them tucks a sprig of rosemary into the neckline of her dress. Not for cooking for the scent. It's her little rebellion. Her breath of freshness in a world soaked in everything else. At the end of the bailey, near a door that leads down to the storerooms, you find a bucket filled with what looks like ash and herbs. One of the castle's stewards walks by and grunts, "To cover the waste in the guard-robe chute." You look again. Right. It's not deodorant. It's medieval kitty litter. Later you'll climb to the battlements. The wind up there is cool and biting and clean. The view will stretch across fields and forests. But for now, here in the belly of the beast, the scent is thick, relentless, and utterly honest. You can almost admire it. Almost. Just maybe breathe through your mouth for now. You wake before dawn because everyone else does. There's no rooster crowing dramatically on the castle walls, no golden sunrise streaming through stained glass. Just cold stone, stiff limbs, and the distant groan of someone already shoveling coal. You rub your eyes and pull on your tunic still damp from yesterday's sweat and not exactly aromatic. Your first task. Get out of the way. Because in a medieval castle you don't own space. The hallways belong to whoever's moving fastest, shouting loudest, or carrying something too heavy to argue with. And right now, that's the servants. They're already rushing through the corridors, balancing trays, buckets, bolts of fabric, and sometimes each other. A maid with flour-dusted hands nearly knocks you into a barrel as she races past. "Out of the way, unless you want scalding water on your boots," she snaps, not unkindly. Just busy. Always busy. This castle, for all its grandeur, runs on the bones and backs of the invisible. Serfs, stewards, pages, grooms, scullions, spitboys, reeves, messengers. You're one of them now, just another pair of feet in the endless shuffle. And it's only Tuesday. Most of these workers live in cramped chambers carved into unused corners under the eaves beside the buttery and drafty lofts over the armory. You'd think living in a castle means luxury. Try sharing a sleeping mat with two cousins and a dog that isn't yours. There's a common myth that castles were neat little pyramids of hierarchy. King at the top, peasants at the bottom, and everyone else neatly slotted in between. The truth, messier. A living knot of duties, rivalries, whispered orders, and more chores than spoons. Take the steward. He's not nobility, but he walks like he owns the place because functionally he does. He's the human clipboard of the entire operation. If a servant sneezes during dinner, he knows about it. If a bucket goes missing, he finds the guy responsible. If a barrel of ale spoils, he definitely knows who gets blamed. Historians still argue whether stewards acted more like managers or glorified bullies. Most agree they had the power to make or ruin your week. Then there are the chamberlains, the butlers, the seneschals, each with their own slice of the castle to govern, and beneath them, the flood of workers who keep everything running. Let's zoom in. You follow a chambermaid named Alice. She's barely 15 but already carries herself like a general. Her job: keep the lady of the house clothed, bathed, and presentable, which means carrying pitchers of hot water, brushing out yards of tangled hair, and locating lost combs that may or may not have fallen into a privy. When not attending to her mistress, Alice joins a brigade of other girls to sweep rushes, Stoke fires, scrub soot from the hearth, and chase off rats the size of respectable cats. You try to help. Bad idea. Your first attempt at scrubbing a stone floor ends in a bruised tailbone, a bucket full of spilled water, and one very unimpressed laundress. She hands you a dry rag and mutters, "Maybe start with polishing the goblets." The castle goblets, by the way, are usually wood or pewter, occasionally silver if you're lucky. But they still need scrubbing, because nobles don't like drinking from something that smells like mutton from last week's feast. And speaking of feasts, someone has to fetch the bread. You take a detour to the bakehouse. It's a squat, smoky building tucked near the outer wall, and it radiates heat even in winter. Inside, two flour-covered men wrestle dough into shape, while a third shovels flattened loaves into a brick oven with the casual grace of someone who's burned their fingerprints off long ago. Bread is life here, literally. For many castle workers, it's half their daily calories. But don't imagine soft baguettes or buttery dinner rolls. This bread is dense hard, and often flecked with bits of bran grit, or if the flour was milled to hastily actual stones. Break your fast, break your tooth. Same deal. One of the bakers hands you a loaf the size of your head and says, "Careful, still hot, and that crust could kill a squirrel." You nod, tuck it under your arm, and start the trek back toward the hall, dodging another cart. 3 barking dogs and a teenage boy who somehow lost one boot. Midway through the yard, a bell rings. The castle bell isn't elegant. It's big chipped and has a crack that makes every ring sound like a startled cow. But it signals the morning meal. Servants won't eat yet. Nobles eat first. Always. You slip into the side corridor leading to the hall and catch a glimpse of the undercooks setting the table. Not plates, but trencher slabs, stale pieces of flat bread used as edible dishes. They'll be piled with stewed vegetables, chunks of meat, and whatever survived the journey from the smokehouse. After the nobles dine, these trenchers go down the line, some to the servants, some to the dogs, some to the poor at the gate. You hope you're high enough in the ladder to get the ones with actual meat on them. You pause a moment and look around. A boy your age is scrubbing soot from the stone hearth. Another hauls a basket of leeks and carrots. A third, eyes puffy from crying, whispers something about dropping a silver spoon. In this world, no mistake goes unnoticed, and no worker, however small, is truly invisible, especially when the king's cousin is due for dinner and wants goose feather pillows. One servant's job today is literally to plump the cushions by hand. She's been at it for an hour and still isn't satisfied. Again she mutters, slapping the fabric. If I don't fluff this right, Lady Anne throws it at me. Everywhere you look, someone is working. Someone is sweating. Someone is rushing past with a worried look. Castle life for everyone except the king is a treadmill. But instead of belts and buttons, it runs on muscle patience and a willingness to get very, very dirty. You lean against a barrel, catch your breath, and watch it all move. The shuffle, the scrape, the unglamorous, relentless dance of the real castle world, where even resting your feet for a moment means someone will probably yell at you for not peeling turnips fast enough. You follow your nose toward the kitchen, which by medieval standards is practically a battlefield. This isn't your grandma's cozy cooking nook with a pie cooling on the windowsill. It's loud, blistering hot, and smells like a wrestling match between smoked onions and something that died 3 days ago and is still being served anyway. The hearth is massive, a yawning stone mouth lined with blackened bricks and iron hooks. Spit boys, young boys tasked with turning meat over the fire, are hard at work, their faces shiny with sweat and determination, occasionally dozing off until slapped awake by the cook's ladle. You inch in, dodging a cloud of steam that bursts from a boiling cauldron. Whatever's in it is chunky. Possibly soup. Possibly yesterday's soup reheated with fresh disappointment. The cook, a woman built like a warhorse and commanding as a general, barks orders like cannon fire. More sage in the stew. That eel is raw who dropped the pigeon. Someone did drop the pigeon. It hits the rush-covered floor with a squish. A dog immediately lurches forward to claim it, but is kicked away by a baker wielding a rolling pin. The bird is dusted off, inspected with a shrug, and tossed back into the pot. You silently vow to skip lunch. Kitchens in castles weren't places of elegance. They were engines, hot, chaotic, and necessary. Food had to be prepared for everyone from the Lord himself to the lowest scullion, and that meant scale massive loaves, barrels of fish, bundles of leeks, and enough meat to make a vegetarian weep. But you wouldn't want to bite into it just yet. Bread is everywhere, but as you quickly learn, not all loaves are equal. The finer white loaves called manchette are reserved for the noble table. They're made with sifted flour and actually taste like something you'd want in your mouth. The rest. You're stuck with horse bread, dense, dark, coarse, and often flecked with bits of husk or the occasional stone fragment, not metaphorically, literally, stone fragments. See, medieval milling wasn't precise. Flour was ground using giant millstones, and when they got worn down, little bits of grit would get into the dough. Eating this bread over time could grind down your teeth like a medieval belt sander. Historians still argue whether this contributed to the notoriously bad teeth found in some medieval skeletons, or if sugar later took the crown. But castle dwellers weren't sipping soda. They were chewing on edible gravel. You grab a trencher, a flat round of bread used as a plate, and test it with your thumb. It doesn't give. You thump it on the edge of the table. Still solid. It might be more effective as a weapon than a utensil. The upside. After the meal, trenchers are either eaten begrudgingly, tossed to the poor, or thrown to the dogs. Recycling medieval style. Back in the kitchen, the chaos continues. A spit turns lazily, displaying a goose that's dripping fat into a trench dug to catch grease. The smell is, well, it's divine. For about 10 seconds. Then the smoke catches in your throat and your eyes water. One of the cooks is preparing a hedgehog dish. No, not that kind of hedgehog. It's a minced meatball spiked with almonds to resemble spines, then dyed with parsley juice and garnished with a glaze. It looks ridiculous, and yet kind of adorable. Near the fire, a potboy scrubs cauldrons that could fit 2 toddlers inside. His hands are red from the lye soap. He looks up at you and says, "Trade jobs," before immediately laughing and returning to scrubbing with a sigh that sounds older than he is. Around the corner you find the cold storage room. It's not exactly refrigerated, but it's shaded with thick walls and salted meat hanging from hooks. You reach for one and think better of it. The flies got there first. You step over to the barrel's ale mostly. Water isn't exactly safe here, especially not near the stables. Even children drink watered-down ale or cider. It's safer, and it dulls the constant taste of charcoal and salt in everything else. A woman at a side table is stuffing fish with herbs and leeks. She's quick, efficient, and entirely unfazed by the fact that her sleeves keep catching fire. "Just pat it out," she mutters, slapping her sleeve and moving on. You think you catch a smile. Despite the madness, there's pride here, a quiet choreography to it all. Everyone knows their place, their timing, their rhythm. Meals are the heartbeat of the castle. If they're late, or bad people notice. Important people. Dangerous people. You remember that the cook is more than a boss. She's a gatekeeper to favor. Nobles who enjoy their food are easier to manage. Nobles who don't, well, someone ends up in the stocks. You try to make yourself useful and carry a tray of boiled eggs out of the kitchen. They're covered in ash. That's just how it is. You shrug and keep going. Along the way, a minstrel plucks a string absent-mindedly near the dining hall entrance. He sings about a dragon and a miller's daughter. No one listens. He doesn't care. You pass the buttery nothing to do with butter, surprisingly. It's where drinks are stored. The butler. Yes, that's the root of the modern title. Guards the barrels like a dragon. You try to sneak a look. He stares you down. You move along, quickly. Back in the hallway, servants line up with platters balanced on arms. Roasted duck, boiled barley, a custard tart that looks ambitious. You take your place. The line begins to move. Dinner will begin soon, and after the nobles eat, you'll get what's left, unless it falls on the floor, in which case the dog you saw earlier, yes, the one who tried to eat the pigeon, will probably beat you to it. Still, even with the madness and the smell and the soot, there's something beautiful about it. The hustle, the craft, the silent honor in doing something well, even if no one notices. Your stomach growls. You might risk the bread after all. You thought things couldn't get more unpleasant than scrubbing soot and dodging soup buckets. Then you meet the latrine boy. His name is Thomas. He's small, pale, and perpetually damp. Not because he sweats a lot, though he probably does, but because his job involves buckets, chutes, and the kind of smells that make even castle dogs turn up their noses. Let's be blunt. Castles didn't have plumbing. They had garderobes, long chutes built into the stone, with narrow openings where nobles could relieve themselves in a semi-private cubby. Waste tumbled down these chutes, ideally, into a cesspit or moat, though ideally did a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. The job of maintaining these delightful features. That falls to Thomas. He's got a long wooden stick he calls the stirrer. You don't ask what it's for. He explains anyway. Sometimes things get stuck, he says cheerfully, like he's describing a garden hose. You've got to poke at it or it overflows back into the chute. And then he trails off and shrugs. You don't want to know what comes after and then. He offers to let you try the stirrer. You decline, vigorously. Despite the disgusting nature of his work, Thomas doesn't seem unhappy. It's honest, he says, wiping his hands on a tunic that's already a mosaic of unfortunate stains. And the pay's better than kitchen duty. You wonder what it must be like to spend your day beneath the castle. Literally. In pits, in tunnels, in shadows. Some castles even had what were called garderobe towers, protruding structures that let waste drop directly into the moat or ground. But during sieges, when you couldn't dump waste out for fear of enemy fire things, accumulated. Historians still argue whether siege-time guardrobes were a health crisis waiting to happen or just another Wednesday. What's not debated is that the job of cleaning them never stopped. And if you thought this was the worst job in the castle, hang on. There's also the gong farmer. That's the guy who digs out cesspits after they've filled up. It's a night job because no one wants to see it, or smell it, or be reminded it exists. Gong farmers wore leather boots, long gloves, and expressions of quiet regret. Thomas thinks they're dramatic. "I've smelled worse," he says proudly. The smell of the latrine, by the way, changes depending on the season. In winter, it's just cold and awful. In summer, it's a living, buzzing thing. The heat brings out notes, rich, fruity, horrifying notes. You didn't think smells had texture until now. You leave the lower corridors and try to breathe through your mouth as you climb back into the main courtyard. The fresh air is, well, it's better. Still tinged with animal and ash, but at least it isn't digestive. And here's the kicker. Despite all this, the nobles' guardrobes were considered an advancement. Better than chamber pots. Better than squatting in a field. Better than what peasants had, which was often find a bush and pray. And some guardrobes were fancy. Upholstered seats. Decorative curtains. Shelves for herbs to mask the scent. If you were really fancy, you had a stone bench with a lid. But the real winners were the castle architects who added chutes that angled away from the main walls so the waste didn't just coat the foundation over time. Genius. Still gross. But genius. You walk past a servant carrying a chamber pot the size of a small barrel. He nods at you like it's perfectly normal. It is. For him. That's the thing about castle life. Nothing stays shocking. Not for long. You adjust. You adapt. You stop asking why and start asking how often you pass through a narrow door and into a hallway where clean rushes have just been laid. They smell faintly of sweetgrass and thyme. Someone's trying to cover the scent of the nearby latrine. It's a losing battle, but you appreciate the effort. You spot a girl dumping a bucket into the moat. You pray it's just laundry water. It probably isn't. The moat itself is a topic worth pausing on. It's not just for dramatic effect or keeping out invaders. Sometimes it's the unofficial garbage chute. Waste dead animals, food scraps. If it's unpleasant and nobody wants to deal with it, it often ends up in the water. The moat doesn't flow, it festers. It's a slow-moving soup of everything the castle expels, and during summer it becomes a mosquito paradise. Still, kids sometimes fish in it. They're braver than you. Back in the courtyard, you finally sit on a barrel to rest. It's been a long morning of dodging refuse, questioning your life choices, and discovering the limits of your gag reflex. Thomas passes you again cheerfully, humming a song about St. Dunstan and the devil. You swear he's whistling through his nose. You admire him a little. It takes a certain kind of resilience to do the work no one else will, to walk through rot and filth and come out with a grin. In his own way, Thomas is essential. More essential, frankly, than half the nobility upstairs who spend their days arguing over cloak clasps and falcon names. In the castle's unspoken hierarchy, people like Thomas live in the shadows, but without them, the entire place would literally collapse under its own waste. So you nod at him, respectfully. He winks, and as the wind shifts, bringing with it another delightful puff of moat air and roast pigeon, you realize something. In this castle, survival isn't about having a title. It's about endurance, and possibly a very strong stomach. You hear the rustle of fabric before you see them. At the far end of the great hallway, just beyond the scullery, the noble woman's chambermaids are already at work. And let's be clear, these aren't pampered ladies-in-waiting lounging about with grapes and embroidery. No, these women are castle multi-tools. Stylists, secret keepers, errand runners, and emergency excuses, all rolled into one. The chambermaid nearest the hearth is elbow-deep in soap water, scrubbing a pair of linen undergarments that belong to someone significantly higher up the food chain. You'd think nobility wouldn't sweat like the rest of us. They do. Possibly more if we're judging by fabric volume and the number of layers involved. Another chambermaid taller with sun-reddened cheeks is brushing out a tangle of long, honey-blonde hair. The hair does not belong to her. It belongs to Lady Cecily, a minor noble who's currently reclining on a cushioned bench and complaining that the lavender in her pillow sachet smells too much like thyme. "It makes me think of roast chicken," she says dramatically, "which is not what I want to dream about." Her maid Gilda nods sympathetically and says, "I'll change it, my lady," even though it's the 5th time this week. You can practically hear the eye roll in her bones. This, you realize, is part of a chambermaid's job to absorb complaints like a sponge absorbs spilled wine, no matter how ridiculous, no matter how small, and always with a curtsy. Being assigned to a noblewoman sounds prestigious until you realize it means you're on call every hour. The lady's awake and a few when she's not. Need warm water for washing. That's you. Need your slippers warmed before bed. That's also you. Need someone to check under the bed for spiders or cursed objects. Guess what? Historians still argue whether chambermaids were considered closer to trusted confidants or glorified personal assistants. The truth? Probably both. They lived in a weird gray space close enough to overhear secrets, but far enough beneath their mistresses to be blamed if those secrets ever leaked. And leak they do. You linger by the doorway as one maid Mari hisses something to another behind a tapestry. "Did you hear about Lady Eleanor? She fainted yesterday at prayers. They say it wasn't fasting, it was the steward's son." The other girl gasps so loudly she drops the shoe she's polishing. Castle gossip, you quickly realize, flows faster than the moat ever could. And the chambermaids, they're the riverbanks. It makes sense. These women dress and undress nobility. They deliver notes. They linger quietly behind chairs during arguments. They collect laundry and occasionally evidence. They are the living pulse of the upper chambers. But don't be fooled into thinking it's all drama and fashion. You follow Gilda down the back hallway to the drying rooms where linens are hung near vents to absorb what little warmth the castle offers. She's lugging a basket that looks like it weighs more than she does. You offer to help. She laughs. "I carried my sister on my back during the flood of 18. This is nothing. Strong arms, stronger will. That's what a chambermaid needs." Back in the room, Lady Cecily is standing now, arms raised as Gilda fastens her dress. It's not a quick process. The gown has laces, ties, hooks, and something called a kirtle, which is either an underdress or a magical curse depending on your patience. Not too tight at the waist, Cecily warns. "I want to look slim, not breathe slim." You step out of the way as another maid enters with a polished hand mirror. She holds it carefully, arms trembling slightly. Glass is expensive, rare enough to get you whipped if you drop it. Cecily inspects her reflection, tilts her chin, and declares, "I shall wear the pearl netting today." All eyes swivel toward a wooden chest. The pearl netting is a hairpiece, a delicate thing that takes 10 full minutes to secure and another 10 to remove. You can tell from the way the maids sigh that this wasn't what they were hoping for. One begins the painstaking process, gently pinning and arranging. Another reaches for a bottle of rose water to dab behind Cecily's ears. You notice something strange. In the background, Gilda is mouthing the prayers from morning mass, not loudly, just softly, repeating them under her breath like a rhythm to keep her hands moving. You ask her about it later. She shrugs, keeps me from snapping when she tells me my calluses are unpleasant to look at. You ask if she ever considered running away. Where to, she says, not bitter, just factual. At least here I'm fed. And if she marries well, I might go with her. Maybe get a better position. It's not just service. It's strategy. Many maids see their roles as stepping stones into higher employment, maybe even into marriage if they're lucky and discreet. Nobles aren't above noticing the help. Affairs happen. Quiet liaisons. Scandals that end in marriages or dismissals depending on who gets caught. But discretion is everything. If you hear something, you forget it. If you see something, you blink it away. That's why the best chambermaids aren't just tidy, they're invisible. One girl once dared to correct her lady's hair part. She was reassigned to muck duty within the hour. Not even the pigs remembered her name. You help fold linens for a moment. It's strangely meditative, the repetitive motion, the scent of lavender crushed between fabric layers. Gilda laughs and says you fold like a noble, which in this case is not a compliment. As the day wears on, the temperature rises in the upper chambers. The stone walls don't breathe well, and the small windows offer little airflow. The maids fan their mistress with large feathers, whispering complaints to one another when she dozes off. In those quiet moments, you see something you didn't expect: gentleness. One maid gently brushes a strand of hair from her lady's brow. Another tucks a worn ribbon into her own sleeve, a keepsake left behind during a fitting. These women may grumble, but they serve with strange devotion, not to titles, to each other. As the bell rings for supper, the noblewoman stands and the maids spring into action, cloak slippers touch of rouge. Gilda adjusts the netting one last time and steps back. Lady Cecily walks out without a word. Gilda exhales. The room relaxes. You look around at the chambermaids, tired, proud, still standing. You nod to Gilda as she wipes her hands and reaches for the next task. Because in this castle the crown may sit on the king's head, but it's these quiet hands that hold everything up. You wake up sore. Not from one grand, glorious battle, but from hauling buckets, bending over scrub brushes, and trying to carry too many things up too many stairs. Your lower back sounds like a drawbridge being raised. You think about stretching, then remember that in the castle there's no time for self-care unless you're nobility or dead. And even the dead don't always get a break. More on that later. Right now it's time for chores. Not cute Pinterest-inspired chores. Not clean out your inbox chores. Real physical soul-denting labor. The kind that starts before sunrise and doesn't stop until your knees whisper threats of betrayal. You head to the courtyard and are immediately handed a broom. Not one of those light plastic things either. This one's bristled with twigs tied in a knot so tight it could sweep gravel into submission. You're told to clean the walk between the stables and the chapel. Not for aesthetic reasons. It's so the noblewoman won't trip in her slippers. Never mind that you just slipped in something you hope was mud. A steward passes by and points to the soot on your tunic. "Wash that," he says before the laundry mistress sees you and cries. Great. More work. You begin to notice the sheer variety of chores being done all around you. A boy with one shoe is running laundry from the upper floor to the wash house. A woman with arms like tree trunks is splitting firewood and stacking it into a perfect pyramid. A girl is chasing a goose through the garden while muttering a prayer for patience. And over near the great hall, 3 boys are peeling turnips like their lives depend on it. They probably do. Peeling turnips badly is the sort of thing that gets you reassigned to garbage duty, or worse, pot washing. That's where you scrape stew crust from iron pots until your fingers prune into oblivion. One girl next to you, Ida, maybe Isla, you've already forgotten, hands you a bundle of rushes. "You're refreshing the floor in the north stairwell," she says, as if you know where that is. You don't, but you nod anyway because no one has time for training in a castle. You learn by doing, or by failing loudly enough that someone corrects you before you burn the place down. Rushes are medieval floor coverings, by the way. Dried plants laid down in layers to absorb spills provide cushioning and catch whatever the ceiling decides to drop. The rushes get changed out monthly, unless it's a bad month, or unless someone forgets. Then you're sweeping through a compost heap of hair crumbs, fleas, and very suspicious liquids. You carry the bundle through a side corridor, past 3 chickens and a sleepy guard, and reach the stairwell. It smells like damp wool and regret. You kneel down and begin the task scooping up old rushes, tossing them into a basket, spreading out the new ones. Your hands are raw within minutes. Your knees ache from the stone floor. You sneeze once, twice from the dust. By the time you're done, you're covered in a fine layer of debris and humility. You return to the yard and barely sit for a breath before another task arrives: polish the candlesticks in the chapel. Sounds simple, right? Until you realize there are 36 of them. Brass, tarnished, and the polish smells like someone tried to turn vinegar into punishment. While working, you overhear 2 servants arguing over whose turn it is to clean out the dovecote. Spoiler, neither of them wants it. Why? Because doves poop. Constantly. Aggressively. And the tower they live in is about as accessible as a tax refund from 1347. You escape that fate for now, but it's a reminder. There is no end to castle chores. Even the knights do their part, though theirs tends to be more about tending their armor, sharpening blades, and telling exaggerated stories about their training wounds. You see one now sitting on a bench and rubbing oil into a helmet while dramatically recounting the time he held off 5 bandits with nothing but a broken pike and divine fury. The stable boy listening looks deeply unconvinced. Elsewhere, the kitchen is bustling again. Scullions are hauling water, chopping roots, and stirring cauldrons the size of bathtubs. A young girl is on her knees scraping candle wax off the stone floor. Someone drops a ladle. No one flinches. Just another sound in the daily grind. Historians still argue whether castle life was truly as exhausting as it appears in records, or if we just focus on the worst parts. But when you live it even for a day, the fatigue seeps in deep. Every movement costs something. You start to notice the gait of other servants, slight limps, twitches in the shoulder, a constant favoring of one knee. The human body wasn't designed for a life of hauling, bending, lifting, scrubbing. Not without breaks. Not without shoes that actually fit. But no one complains. Not really. They groan. They sigh. But they work. Because they must. Because the castle never stops. Fires must be fed. Floors must be swept. Meals must be made. Horses fed. Linen dried. Grain ground. Gates secured. Beds turned. Water drawn. Over and over again. You find yourself drifting into the rhythm, not liking it, but understanding it. By late afternoon, your hands are stained with wax ash and something green you can't identify. Your shoulders scream, your head hums with the overlapping noise of 50 people, each focused on surviving another hour. You lean against a wall for just a second, that's all. Just a second. A broom smacks your ankle. Don't sleep standing, someone mutters. You'll miss the chamber call. Chamber call. Of course. Time to light the fires in the noble rooms before night falls. You grab a bundle of kindling and march up the stairs. It's going to be a long evening, because in this castle the work isn't done when the sun sets. It's only done when they say it's done. You think kids in castles lived magical, carefree lives. Let's fix that. The next time someone says childhood was simpler back then, point them toward little Martin, 7 years old, barefoot in the cold, dragging a basket of onions up the stairs because the cook screamed at him for forgetting them during the midday meal. Children in castles weren't decorating cookies or playing knights with cardboard swords. They were part of the labor force. No minimum wage, no recess, no juice boxes. You see them everywhere once you start paying attention. A skinny girl, maybe 10, is scrubbing dried blood off a saddle with a handful of reeds. 2 boys, one with a nosebleed, and neither with all their teeth, are stacking firewood unevenly and getting yelled at for it. And over near the barn, a child with hands too small for the bucket he's carrying is being followed by a goat with murder in its eyes. He's too tired to run. The goat knows this. Children born into castle life, usually to servants or tradesmen, didn't get childhoods in the modern sense. They were expected to contribute early. Some started as young as 5 or 6, assigned simple but endless tasks, gathering kindling, fetching water, chasing birds from the grain, carrying messages between rooms, or everyone's favorite, shoveling animal droppings from the bailey. Of course, if you were born to noble blood, your childhood was different, but not necessarily easier. Noble children were, in a sense, investments. Their education, behavior, and marriages were all carefully orchestrated to preserve land alliances and status. That meant strict discipline, constant supervision, and education that prioritized Latin over playtime. You glimpse this firsthand when you wander into a side chamber used as a schoolroom. A boy, probably 12, is reciting a passage from Ovid in a droning monotone, while a stern cleric with the haircut of a disgruntled pigeon taps a switch against the table in warning. Another child, a girl with ink on her cheek, is trying to copy letters with a quill that's clearly seen better days. She sneezes, smears her work, and flinches preemptively. The switch doesn't fall this time, but it might tomorrow. Historians still argue whether this kind of education was widespread or limited to the very rich. But here in this castle, at least some version of school exists for those with rank. For the others, life is education. You learn how to carry things without spilling, how to bow low enough to avoid a scolding, how to hold your tongue when a noble child blames you for something they did. And yes, noble kids could be little tyrants. You spot one now young Lord Alric, age 8, dressed like he's auditioning for a stained glass window. He's shouting at a page boy for handing him the wrong game piece in 9 men's Morris. The page, who's older but lower born, just nods and takes the blame. That's the rule. The noble is always right, even when he's flinging pieces across the room. Still, not all noble children are monsters. Some are just scared, or lonely, or quietly studying how to survive a system they didn't choose either. You pass by the nursery. A wet nurse cradles a noble infant who's fussing louder than the hounds in the kennels. The nurse hums something soft, and you notice her eyes fluttering closed for a moment. She's been awake for 3 nights straight. The baby belongs to a lady who only visits when guests are present. This, too, is castle life. The lower caste children sleep wherever there's space corners of kitchens, empty haylofts, sometimes curled beside warm pigs in the coldest months. Blankets are rare. Siblings huddle together using each other for heat. A girl named Edda tells you she once woke up with a cat on her face and considered herself lucky. It was warm, she says simply. Despite the hardship, children laugh. Somehow, you see them playing a quick game with stones in the dirt between chores. You hear someone whistling off-key while scrubbing a kettle. One boy cartwheels down the path and gets yelled at immediately. But still he cartwheeled. You pause near the stable where a group of children are huddled around a goose. Not to harm it. They've dressed it up in scraps of cloth like a knight and are staging a battle between it and a turnip with a face carved into it. The goose wins. Obviously. You smile. Then you remember the next task, cleaning the stairwell that leads to the cellars. It smells like mold and melancholy. You gather your tools and sigh. A boy passes you on the stairs. He's carrying a clay pot of honey with both hands. You recognize him. That's Jory. He lost 2 toes to frostbite last winter. He smiles at you with a gap in his teeth and says, "Careful down there." The stairs bite. You believe him. Because in a place built of stone and soot and barely repaired staircases, a simple fall can mean weeks of pain or permanent damage. You make it down without injury and scrub for what feels like hours. The stones are slippery. The light is poor. Your knees are screaming again. When you finally crawl back up, it's late afternoon. The children are still at it, scrubbing, sweeping, fetching. But they're slower now, paler, blinking against the fading light. A bell rings, and some of them race to the chapel for evening prayers. Others collapse near the walls to rest before supper. You sit near them, back to the cool stone, and watch them breathe. Children in a medieval castle didn't have toys, cartoons, or carefree weekends. They had sore hands, raw feet, and a childhood that started at dawn and ended when their backs gave out. And yet, they still found ways to play, to joke, to learn each other's names, to share scraps of bread behind the cook's back. Even in hardship, there's resilience. Even in a castle, childhood never quite disappears. You follow the smell of ink. Not parchment and polish, not the faint perfume of waxed seals or beeswax candles. No ink, thick, bitter black as regret, and always clinging to the fingertips of the men who live their lives bent over scrolls. Welcome to the scriptorium home of the scribes, clerks, and one poor guy who keeps forgetting his Latin declensions and now fears sleep because verbs are haunting him. The scriptorium is tucked away in a quiet upper room where the sunlight filters through narrow slits, casting long stripes across a table scattered with quills, sand trays, and stacks of half-finished charters. The air is dry, dusty, and heavy with the sound of scratching pens. You ease into the doorway and instantly feel out of place. Everyone in here is sitting upright and squinting. No soot, no pig smell, no rushes to change, just stiff backs, aching wrists, and the crushing pressure of perfectionism. At the center of the room, Master Leoric, the castle's chief scribe, looms like a withered hawk peering through horn-rimmed spectacles at a poorly copied sentence. He points one bony finger. Deus vult, not Deus volt. Volt with a U. Unless you want this document to be blessed by a bolt of thunder instead of the will of God. The young apprentice, Alan, maybe 15, nods furiously and dips his quill in the ink again, this time more cautiously. Scribes were the quiet engine of castle bureaucracy. Everything had to be written: legal contracts, land grants, household accounts, inventory lists, letters to other nobles, and religious texts. Without them, a lord wouldn't know what taxes were due, which serf had married whom, or whether the wine cellar had enough barrels to last through winter. And it wasn't just writing. It was math. Carefully calculated tallies of goods, estimated harvest yields, conversions from coin to barter, and tallying fines for broken contracts. You think scrubbing rushes was hard? Try converting Roman numerals for a living. You hover near a work table where another clerk is cataloging inventory from the castle's granary. 7 sacks oats, 11 sacks barley, 2 missing, possibly due to rats or cook's midnight snacks. He adds a sketchy rat doodle in the margin and smirks. You like this guy. Further down the table, you spot a page of prayers being copied. Every letter is neat, deliberate, evenly spaced, but toward the bottom, there's a smear where someone sneezed. The result. The name of a saint is now indecipherable and probably offensive. The scribe groans and starts over. Why don't they just print it, you almost blurt out before remembering that printing isn't a thing yet. Not for another couple hundred years. For now, it's all by hand. Every single word. Mistakes aren't just frowned upon. They can be catastrophic. One wrong letter, and suddenly a tax declaration means the pigs belong to the bishop. One slip of the ink, and a birth record becomes a burial notice. Historians still argue whether medieval scribes deliberately added flourishes to make their texts harder to read, or whether their handwriting just naturally devolved into elegant chaos after years of chronic neck pain. It doesn't help that real parchment made from animal skins is expensive and not exactly forgiving. If you mess up, you can scrape the ink off, but it leaves marks. The page remembers. You lean in to examine one page and notice a strange creature doodled in the margins, something with the face of a bishop, the legs of a chicken, and an indecently grumpy expression. You point. Ah, says the clerk beside you. That's Gerald's commentary on the new taxes. Apparently, marginalia was not only tolerated, it was a survival mechanism. A way for overworked scribes to vent joke or insert passive-aggressive commentary without risking a whipping. Some pages feature dancing snails. Others rabbits jousting with maces. One manuscript allegedly features a bishop mooning a dragon. Monks may have illuminated manuscripts, but castle scribes had opinions. Still, the job isn't all doodles and sarcasm. Late afternoon sunlight slants across the room as the clerks begin counting coin. actual coin. Silver pennies stacked in neat piles with records being updated in ledgers. The weight of these numbers matters. One missing mark could mean accusations of theft or fraud, or worse, having to explain yourself to the steward. You hear a muffled argument near the fire. But the figures match last month. The Lord added 5 pigs, you dolt. They were a gift from Baron Alric. Oh, right, I thought they died. No, those were the other pigs, accounting not for the faint of heart. You ask what happens to scribes who mess up too often. Demoted one mutters, to stable inventory, or worse, grain tracking. A clerk named Oswin, maybe in his 30s, pauses from his work and cracks his knuckles. His hands are blotched with ink and calluses. You ask why he chose this life. He shrugs. I can't lift a sword. My father farmed until a mule broke both his legs. This is better. I sleep indoors. You nod. The work may be quiet, but it's not easy. It demands precision, memory, humility, and an ability to sit still longer than any human ever should. You stay until the bell rings. The scribes begin to pack away their materials carefully, blotting fresh ink and stacking parchment between weighted boards. Oswin leans over to Alan, the apprentice, and says, "If you smear another letter, I'm feeding you to the goose." You're not sure if it's a joke. Probably. Maybe. As you leave, you glance one last time at the shelves lined with scrolls, account books, and letters sealed with wax, each one a heartbeat of the castle. Every battle, every marriage, every barrel of ale recorded, stored, remembered, because someone had the patience to write it all down. You hear it before you see it. A shriek, a yelp, a series of squawks that sound like an argument between 2 toddlers and a trumpet. Then scratching, scuffling, flapping. You round the corner just in time to see a falcon take off from the castle's south yard wings, slicing the air with terrifying grace. Behind it, a boy no older than 12 is yelling something about the bait being too soggy. Welcome to the non-human side of castle life. Because for every night cook or chambermaid in the castle, there's an animal doing its job too. Sometimes reluctantly, sometimes violently, and always with fewer manners. You're introduced first to the falconer's quarters, a low open building near the mews, which is a fancy medieval word for bird garage. Inside it smells like feathers, raw meat, and deep ancient patience. The falconer himself, Master Edwin, is already tending to a hooded peregrine perched on a worn leather glove. The bird is terrifying up close. Black eyes, hooked beak, silent judgment radiating off it like heat from a forge. This one's Ember, Edwin says proudly. Caught 3 hares last week, and 1 unfortunate hat. You blink. He grins. It was on the steward. Falconry is more than a rich man's hobby here. It's status, sport, and surprisingly, dinner. Noble lords keep falcons to hunt game, impress visitors, and establish their social rank. The rarer the bird, the higher your prestige. Peregrines, merlins, even the prized gerfalcons if you're really important. You don't just own them, you train them, bond with them, and hope they don't claw your face off. Historians still argue whether falconry was truly common among lower-ranking nobles or just elite fluff. But in this castle, at least, everyone knows who Edwin is. Because without him, the Lord's afternoon hunt would turn into an awkward nature walk. Outside, the mews are alive with movement. Hawks shifting on perches. Owls tucked in corners. One stubborn kestrel pecking at a wooden beam like it owes him money. Edwin shows you the feeding process, raw scraps of quail rabbit, even the occasional frog. The birds eat daintily, then explode into flight when released. Watching them soar is hypnotic. And yet, you don't want one landing on you any time soon. Not far from the mews, you spot another curious sight: ferrets. Yes, ferrets. In a little pen by the grain store, a cluster of the squirmy creatures wriggles beneath a pile of straw. You see snouts, tails, mischief. These are the ratters, says a boy with straw in his hair. You think cats are good, ferrets are better. He's right. In castles, ferrets are used to chase rodents from tight corners and hollow walls. They're small, fast, and disturbingly clever. Once released into a tunnel, they'll flush out rats like a furry tornado of justice. The ferret boy Wilf lifts one onto his shoulder. It immediately tries to eat his sleeve. "This one's Lady Screamy Paws," he says deadpan. Don't make eye contact. You don't. Of course, cats do live in the castle, too. You've seen a few slinking between barrels and darting beneath tables in the great hall. They're half pet, half pest control. No collars, no names. Just quiet prowlers with zero concern for your personal space. You're warned not to feed them too well. If they get lazy, Wilf says, the rats get bold. And you do not want bold rats near the grain. You nod, firmly. And then there are the dogs. Dozens of them. Big hounds for hunting. Medium-sized dogs for guarding. Small yappy things for noblewomen to dote on. Most are mutts, but they're loyal. Loud. Always underfoot. You pass a group of stable boys trying to wrangle a greyhound with opinions. Another mutt naps near the forge, one ear twitching at each clang of the hammer. And in the kitchen, a one-eyed terrier named Turnip, who's been banned from 3 pantries and keeps coming back. You like Turnip immediately. Pigs, sheep, cows, and goats round out the castle's animal population, of course. They're in pens near the outer bailey, cared for by a rotating team of half-asleep servants who joke that the pigs are smarter than the cooks, and horses don't forget them. You stop by the stables to see the grooms brushing a destrier, one of the large war horses kept ready for the Lord's travels. The beast is massive. Muscles rippling, eyes watchful. You imagine riding it, and then immediately imagine falling off it. The head groom, a wiry woman named Brytha, grunts at your expression. "Takes years to ride one proper," she says. "Takes seconds to land on your back and wake up seeing stars." You wisely back away. Some castles even kept exotic pets, peacocks, monkeys, and once allegedly a lion given as a diplomatic gift. But here practicality rules. Every animal has a purpose. Even the noisy geese in the garden serve as alarms. If they start honking at night guards, reach for spears. Better than a bell, someone tells you. Geese never sleep. Or forgive. You believe them. Animals in a castle are more than background. They're companions, workers, weapons, and sometimes therapists. You pass a maid feeding scraps to a 3-legged cat. She whispers her worries to it between bites. The cat doesn't judge. It just eats. You find yourself watching the birds fly again later that evening. The sky is pale pink, and the falcons cut across it like dark blades. You realize there's something primal about castle life, about living shoulder to shoulder with creatures who don't pretend, don't flatter, and don't wear brocade to dinner. They survive. Like everyone else in the castle, they do what they're made to do. Day after day, no complaints. Except the goose. That one definitely complains. You didn't think tax day existed in a medieval castle. Oh, it exists. And it arrives on horseback. The tax collector isn't a welcome sight. Not even among the nobles. Not even on feast day. Especially not on feast day. He rides in just after midday, flanked by 2 guards wearing the colors of a neighboring barony. His ledger is heavy. His face heavier. He looks like a man who's never smiled without being paid for it. Sir Gerwin, someone mutters with a sigh. The collector. That word collector sends a ripple through the castle. Cooks suddenly double-check their ingredient lists. Stewards whisper to each other behind ale barrels. The master of horses starts polishing bridles like they're made of gold. Everyone has something they hope won't be counted. You trail behind Sir Gerwin as he dismounts. His cloak is fine, but his boots are mud-caked. His quill is already in hand. He starts in the granary, counts every bushel, every sack, asks the steward for last year's records, and then frowns when the numbers don't match. You had 23 sacks in September, he says. There are only 18 now. Rats, the steward says. Rats always show up when taxes are due. Gerwin replies, not looking up. Next, the ale stores. Gerwin lifts a lid on a barrel, dips a wooden ladle, tastes the brew, spits it into the straw. Too bitter. I'll tax it as second grade. The brewer winces. That'll sting. Then it's on to livestock. You're standing nearby when he counts pigs. You count too. 18, maybe 19 if you include the one sleeping face down in mud. Gerwin circles one, points at a mark behind its ear. This one's from Baron Calverley's herd. The swineherd turns gray. Turns out the castle's lord may have borrowed a few pigs from a rival territory last spring and never quite mentioned it. Or paid for it. Or returned them. You know minor oversight. Gerwin notes it down. No accusation. No outburst. Just the slow stroke of ink across parchment. That's worse. Historians still argue how consistent medieval tax systems were. Some lords imposed fair, predictable dues. Others were more flexible. It depended on their mood, or debt, or how annoyed they were that morning. You follow Gerwin into the hall where the lord of the castle is finally ready to greet him. Everyone's dressed up fresh surcoats, brushed boots, even a new tapestry on the back wall showing a scene that looks suspiciously like the lord winning a battle he probably didn't attend. Gerwin doesn't comment. He just sits, opens his ledger, and begins asking questions. How many serfs on your lower farm? 36. The lord replies. Gerwin flips a page. Records say 39. 2 died. 1 ran off. Did you report the death? No. Then it's 39. A pause. Did the one who ran off take tools? A longer pause. Yes. Gerwin nods, scratches out a line, writes a fine. Everyone flinches. It's not the tax itself that hurts, it's the fines. A pig gone missing. A door not properly recorded. a surplus of grain that wasn't registered last harvest. Suddenly the feast you're preparing for tomorrow, it's funded by debts you just realized you owe. And yet, feasting still happens. Because when guests arrive, especially officials like Gerwin, appearances matter. The hall is lit with torches. The best trenchers come out actual wood plates, not old bread. The food smells incredible roasted venison onions stewed with ale pies stuffed with mushrooms and herbs. You, of course, are not seated at the table. You're behind the scenes, hauling trays, refilling jugs, trying not to trip over a dog under the table. The conversation at the noble table is all forced smiles and diplomatic chuckles. Gerwin accepts a slice of pie but doesn't touch it. Instead, he picks up his goblet and says, "Your stables are in better shape than last year." A compliment. Everyone pauses. The Lord beams. We've worked hard to improve them. Gerwin nods. Yes. Pity about the missing cart axle. I noticed it on my way in. You can hear the silence. Then he smiles. Just barely. No matter. We'll adjust the tithe accordingly. He raises his goblet. Drinks. The tension doesn't break, but it shifts. It always does. Because everyone knows this game. You pretend you're not overtaxed. He pretends the books are accurate. The penalties arrive quietly. The coins change hands in private. And next season he comes again. The feast continues. Songs are played. Meat is devoured. The dogs under the table are in heaven. Nobles toast things no one understands, and the servants, like you, sweat in silence. Later that night, you help clean up. The main hall is a mess, crumpled napkins, bits of bone, spilled wine, a child's slipper for some reason. You carry trenchers out to the yard where they'll be scraped or fed to the pigs. You pass Gerwin's guards who are dozing upright in the corner. Then you see Gerwin himself walking alone through the bailey. He's not carrying anything, just his ledger pressed to his chest. He stops to look up at the tower. The stars are out. It's quiet now. You wonder what he thinks of it all, this endless system of counting, taxing, fining. Does he hate it? Does he love it? Or has he simply accepted that in a world of castles and kingdoms, someone has to keep track of the pigs? He walks on. You return to your chores. And the next morning, when the sun rises and the flags lift in the breeze, the castle pretends like nothing happened. But the cooks short one duck, the steward's chewing his fingernails. And somewhere in the grain ledger there's a tiny mark in Gerwin's handwriting that simply says, "Watch closely next time." You wake to the sound of hammers. It's not battle, not repair. Not even punishment this time. It's just the castle working, and today the forge is alive. You follow the clanging through the morning haze across the damp courtyard, where steam rises from the stables and a bucket of yesterday's stew has mysteriously frozen solid. Another day in paradise. Around the back, near the outer bailey, the blacksmith's forge crackles and roars. It's a squat, open-walled building permanently coated in soot. Smoke curls from its chimney like an old man's sigh. Inside, controlled chaos. At the center stands the blacksmith master, Holt arms like tree trunks, face like a brick that's seen too much fire. He's hammering a red-hot horseshoe against an anvil, sparks flying in every direction. You flinch. He doesn't. He's surrounded by tools, tongs, hammers, bellows, files, and a small army of apprentices scrambling to stay out of his way while pretending not to be terrified of him. "Keep the coals hot," he bellows. "If I see gray ash, someone's losing eyebrows." One of the boys drops the bellows rope and quickly pretends he didn't. Blacksmithing in the castle isn't just about horseshoes, it's everything. Nails, hinges, latches, chains, locks, brackets, and of course weapons blades, arrowheads, the occasional axe if someone's been dramatic lately. You watch as Holt shapes a blade from raw iron, folding it, hammering, cooling, then hammering again. Each strike lands with precision, like a heartbeat you can feel in your teeth. He doesn't speak while he works. Only afterward, when the metal is cooling in its trough, does he glance at you. "New lad." You nod. "Ever burn your hand on your own stupidity?" You blink. "Not yet." He grins. "You will." That's comforting. Outside the forge, there's more metalwork happening in the armory next door. There, chainmail is being assembled ring by ring by ring. A boy named Corin is hunched over a bench, weaving iron circles together in a pattern so tight it makes your fingers ache just watching. "Take a look," he says, holding up a piece. "It's heavier than you expect. Maybe 10 pounds, and that's just one section. A full shirt of mail. Easily 30 or more. And you're supposed to fight in that. Chainmail won't stop a spear in the ribs," Corin mutters as if reading your thoughts, "but it might give you an extra breath to say goodbye." Lovely. Each ring is riveted closed with a tiny hammer tap. It takes days to make a single hauberk. Weeks if your hands are sore. Years if you get reassigned every time the blacksmith catches you yawning. Next to the mailmaker sits a cooper, a barrel maker, measuring staves with obsessive focus. The cooper's tools are ancient and elegant draw knives, hoop drivers, scorps. You've never seen a man so emotionally invested in curved wood. But barrels matter. A lot. No refrigeration means everything is salted, brined, pickled, or fermented. You need barrels to store meat, fish, ale, wine, vinegar, and occasionally unpleasant secrets no one wants found. The cooper. Elric catches your stare and grunts. Bad barrel. Bad week. No ale. No brine. No fish. Just complaints. He hammers a hoop into place. It echoes like a bell. Everything here echoes. Just past him 2 men are shoeing a horse. Not just any horse, a destrier, tall and proud and deeply unimpressed with this process. The groom holds the reins tightly, while the farrier, hands calloused beyond recognition, holds the hoof between his knees and hammers the shoe in place with clinical indifference to danger. The horse flinches. The farrier doesn't. Big beasts, he says to you, but worse than geese when they're moody. You make a mental note to never anger a destrier. Inside the nearby workshop, you meet the tinker, a thin, wiry man who sharpens blades and fixes broken metal things with the demeanor of someone constantly disappointed by other people's welds. He shows you a broken lock from the castle gate. "Came apart in the rain," he says, turning it over in his hands. "Made it last year. Too rushed. Won't happen again." And you believe him, because here in the castle's industrial belly, pride is measured in durability. A well-forged hinge that doesn't rust. A chainmail sleeve that doesn't tear. A horseshoe that outlives the horse. There's something noble in it, even if the blacksmith yells a lot and smells like charcoal wrapped in onions. Historians still debate whether castle industries were entirely self-sufficient or relied heavily on local villages. The answer seems to be both. A good castle had its own craftsmen, But the big orders like siege weapons or architectural stonework often came from beyond the walls. Still, with a forge, an armory, a cooperage, a tannery, and the occasional glass blower, castles were basically medieval factories wrapped in stone. You spend the afternoon helping Corin sort rings by size. It's tedious, it's finger-numbing, it's strangely satisfying, until one rolls under the table and triggers a 10-minute hunt involving a broom, a bench, and a very angry cat who did not consent to being part of the search party. Eventually, you retrieve the ring, return it to the pile, and Corin gives you a respectful nod. That's practically a knighthood in chainmail terms. As evening sets in, the forge cools, the anvil's quiet, and the craftsmen lean against stone walls with mugs of weak ale and stronger complaints. You sit with them, soot on your face, fingers raw, and a new appreciation for the weight of work done well. Because in this castle the shine on the knight's blade, the lock on the lord's chamber, and the barrel keeping the ale from spoiling all begin here. In fire, in sweat, in hands that don't seek glory, only function. You thought the castle slept at night. It doesn't. Especially not the guards. The sun has dipped beyond the hills, and with it comes a different kind of castle rhythm. Gone are the clanging hammers, the shouting cooks, the squabbling chambermaids. In their place, cloaks, torches, and the unmistakable sound of boots scraping against cold stone. You trail behind one of the night guards as he begins his rounds. His name is Beric. He's got a limp in one leg, a sword on his hip, and a grin that's somehow both sleepy and threatening. "Stay close," he mutters. "If you fall in the well, I'm not going in after you." Comforting. He leads you up a narrow spiral staircase toward the ramparts. The stone steps are slick from moisture, worn smooth from centuries of footsteps. You duck instinctively at each twist, one wrong move, and your forehead becomes part of the architecture. At the top, you step out into the night air. The wind bites. You wrap your cloak tighter and squint into the darkness. The castle walls stretch in both directions, narrow walkways lined with low battlements. Below the land is nothing but silhouettes, rolling fields, distant trees, the faint glimmer of the river far beyond. And it's quiet. Not peaceful, not serene, just waiting. Beric hands you a torch. "Don't drop it," he says. Or me. The patrol begins. You walk slowly, boots clunking against the stones, peering into the shadows beyond the wall. The torches flicker and sputter, casting long dancing shapes. The sound of your breathing becomes your loudest companion. You ask if anything ever happens during night duty. "Oh, all the time," Beric says. "Owls swoop past, mice chew through boot leather. Sometimes someone forgets they're not supposed to drink the lamp oil." You wait. Then he chuckles. Not much. But it only has to go wrong once. That's the thing about castle security. It's not about constant action. It's about constant readiness. Every gate, every watchtower, every shift through the night is about stopping the one disaster that might never come. But when it does, you don't get a second chance. You pass another guard on his post, leaning against the wall with a spear across his lap. His eyes are open. Barely. Beric slaps the butt of his spear. "Stay awake, or I swear I'll put a frog in your boots." The guard straightens. "All ready," Diddy says. You can't tell if he's joking. Further down the ramparts, the wind grows stronger. You feel the full weight of the cold. It cuts through layers. It chews at your fingertips, the kind of chill that settles in your bones like rent-paying tenants. Winter's worse, Barrick says, tugging his cloak tighter. Metal freezes to your fingers. Breath turns to ice on your beard. And the wolves. You pause. Wolves. He nods toward the tree line in the distance. They watch. You won't hear them not till it's too late. Once we found a sheep with nothing left but the hooves. Quietest thing I ever saw. You believe him. There's something primal about standing on the wall at night. The flicker of flame, the howling wind, the endless unknowable dark beyond the moat. It makes you feel very small and very real. The guards here aren't pampered. They don't have plate armor or polished swords. Just cloaks, spears, and worn eyes. They drink broth to stay warm and trade jokes to stay awake. A lot of the job is boredom, but interrupted boredom by fear. Sometimes it's not wolves. Sometimes it's bandits. A torch spotted in the trees. A rustle by the outer gate. A snapped rope on the drawbridge. The kind of small thing that escalates into panic if you miss it. Historians still argue whether medieval castles were truly ever safe or if the illusion of security was just that. The truth, every castle was a fortress and a target, and at night, no matter how thick the walls, the fear crept in. You pause at the southeast tower where the guards rotate for warm drinks. There's a brazier here glowing red with coal. You hover near it and sigh in relief. Your toes had started to feel like cold, damp stones in your boots. Barrick leans over and ladles broth from a small pot. Stew from supper, he says. Don't ask what's in it. You don't. You sip it. It's salty hot, vaguely meaty, and the best thing you've had all week. A bell chimes once in the distance. That's not the chapel bell. That's the gatekeeper, Barrick mutters. Midnight check. You head down. At the main gate, a stocky man with arms like wine barrels inspects the chains on the drawbridge. He runs his hand over the mechanism, checking for ice cracks or signs of tampering. All's quiet. But he logs it anyway, scribbling with chalk on a slate, 12th hour. No change. Then he locks the inner gate behind him. Every hour. No exceptions. You glance toward the portcullis, the great iron teeth poised above the archway. If there was an attack, that thing would slam down in seconds. Probably. Hopefully. Did it ever jam, you ask? Once he replies. Fixed it fast, or we'd all be skulls by now. Reassuring. You return to the wall. The wind's even colder now. Your nose has stopped functioning. Your hands feel like they belong to someone else. But the stars are brighter, the sky wider, and the fire in the brazier burns on. You take another slow walk. No alarms. No wolves. Just the quiet rhythm of feet on stone torches crackling the distant splash of water in the moat. And in that stillness, a strange calm. Because in this moment, the castle is breathing but not sleeping. It's guarded by tired men in cloaks. And somewhere down in the bailey, a boy snores beside a dog. Life goes on. You wake with a start to the sound of thunder. Not the natural kind. Not sky-born. Not even weather. This thunder comes from within the walls. Thudding boots, shouted commands, clanking iron. Something is happening. You throw on your cloak and step into the courtyard, just as the chaos unfolds. It's not an attack, it's a drill. Apparently, once a season, or whenever the Lord feels paranoid, the entire castle runs through a siege rehearsal. Today is that day, and no one warned you. Around you, servants scramble to secure food stores. Guards rush to their stations, helmets half fastened. A page trips over a helmet strap and gets scooped up by a passing knight who barely seems to notice. The castle is becoming a locked box. You feel the drawbridge rise beneath your feet, the chains groaning like tired giants. Archers position themselves in slits above the main gate. Potboys lug heavy cauldrons up narrow staircases, not to cook, but to be filled with boiling water in case attackers breach the walls. You dodge a passing wheelbarrow full of sandbags and end up face to face with the steward. You, pantry. Now. No questions. You run. Inside the pantry, the air is cool, dry, and thick with the scent of salted meat and old turnips. 2 boys are organizing jars of pickled onions. A girl counts wheels of cheese and mutters under her breath like she's doing battle math. It's not glamorous, but it's essential. A castle under siege must survive for weeks with no new supplies. Everything matters. Bread oil, vinegar, salt beans. Especially salt. Without it, meat rots. And with no meat, morale dies faster than the troops. You help stack dried fish into sealed crates. The smell haunts your dreams almost instantly. Then it's on to the water casks. There's no well inside the keep. The best castles had underground cisterns, but this one, just barrels, refilled from the main well. And during a siege, that well is outside the main stronghold. If you didn't top off those casks yesterday, you're drinking wine and praying today. And wine doesn't keep you alert forever. Back in the bailey, you hear the shouting continue. Guards are hauling up makeshift wooden reinforcements, bracing inner doors, checking the hinges on supply rooms. Someone yells archers to the southeast wall, even though there are no archers left. Everyone's pretending today, but pretending well. You glance up at the keep, the great central tower. It's the final fallback point. If everything else falls, if the walls are breached and the gate burns, that's where the Lord and his closest protectors retreat. It's built to withstand the worst. Sort of. You've climbed its stairwell before. It's narrow, awkward, a nightmare in a fight, but defensible. Very. Especially when you realize that the only access can be blocked by flipping a heavy beam across the door. Inside the rooms are tight, but better than the rest of the castle. There's food storage, arrows, even a small stone well for drinking water, one of the few luxuries that shows someone planned ahead. But if you are trapped there, the real enemy becomes time. Food runs out. Firewood disappears. Disease creeps in. Morale cracks. The walls may hold, but the people inside don't always. Historians still argue whether these siege drills actually helped. Some say they gave a false sense of readiness. Others insist they saved lives when the real sieges came. You get the feeling it depends on how many people showed up sober. You're pulled from your thoughts by a horn blast. It's the all clear, just a drill. You exhale, then collapse on a bench. Your muscles ache from carrying crates. Your ears ring from shouting. Your stomach protests after being force-fed panic and smoked herring. But the drill worked. The castle sealed. The people moved. The gears turned. And now repairs. You're immediately handed a broom and told to clean mud from the chapel steps where two squires wrestled over a dropped arrowhead. As you sweep, you hear the servants gossiping. Last time they ran this drill, someone locked the chickens inside the weapons room. I heard a boy peed on the signal bell. I heard the Lord himself tripped on his own scabbard. You don't know what's true. You don't care. You're just glad it's over. Later at supper, there's less laughter than usual. Everyone's too tired. Even the dogs look drained. A goose is asleep under the bench. No one wakes it. You sit near the fire, staring into the flames, thinking about what would really happen if an army showed up tomorrow. Would the walls hold? Would the guards fight? Would the cook still try to stretch the salt pork? You look around. Everyone's still here, still breathing, still moving, and somehow, that's enough. The castle isn't just stone and mortar. It's the people who move when the horn sounds, who stack barrels, who boil water, who climb the tower and hope the enemy never comes. Tonight, the walls are still, but the memory of the drill lingers in your bones, because this place may not always be safe, but it is ready. You wake to laughter. Not the cruel kind, not the chaotic cackle of soldiers drunk on sour wine, but honest, full-bellied, long-awaited laughter echoing through the great hall. It's a feast day. No siege drills, no latrine duty, no boiling turnips or shivering in a tower. Today there's music food, and if you're lucky, a chance to sit for longer than 6 minutes without being barked at. The castle, normally a blur of movement and dirt and noise, is decorated. Actual flowers hang from wooden beams. Rushes on the floor have been replaced with fresh-cut herbs that crunch gently underfoot. Even the dogs look slightly cleaner. You sneak a peek at the Lord's table. Silver platters, polished goblets, trenchers fresh from the oven. It's the castle version of fine china. A pig's been roasting since before dawn, its skin glistening like lacquered wood, and the smell alone could make a monk break a fast. Feasts didn't happen every week, but when they did, the castle transformed. Birthdays, saint days, harvests, weddings, funerals. They were all good enough reasons to break open the wine casks and drag out the best recipes. Even if those best recipes involved stuffing a pigeon with a fig, then stuffing that pigeon into a swan, then sewing the swan shut and putting its feathers back on. Yes, that happened, often. Historians still argue whether dishes like that were actually eaten or just displayed for status. Either way, it meant one thing: work. You, of course, are not feasting. You're carrying platters, one in each hand, duck in one apple tarts in the other, both hot, both heavy, both smelling good enough to make your stomach threaten mutiny. You shuffle past noblemen, comparing falcons, past a juggler balancing 3 candlesticks, and an orange, past a minstrel playing something vaguely musical on a 5-stringed lute. Somewhere in the background, a boy is vomiting from excitement or ale or both. No one pays him any mind. The castle hall is alive. Chatter overlaps with clinking goblets. Someone shouts about a boar hunt. Someone else starts a song badly, A dog darts between legs, snatches a drumstick, and disappears like a meat-seeking ghost. Laughter erupts. No one stops eating. And here's the strange thing. For all its filth and hardship, castle life on feast day, it's kind of fun. You catch glimpses of joy where you don't expect it. Two maids dancing barefoot in the corner. The steward actually smiling as he samples wine. A knight trying to teach a child how to duel with wooden spoons. Even the cook, terrifying as she normally is, leans back for a breath and watches the room like a proud general surveying her conquered battlefield. And this is just the upper hall. Down below, near the kitchen and servants' quarters, there's another celebration. Rougher, louder, less swan, more stew, but it's real. It's full. You slip down to the yard and find a bonfire crackling in a pit. Servants dance in a circle. Someone's playing pipes terribly. A few men are attempting to roast onions on sticks. A girl has braided rushes into a crown and placed it on the head of a pig who seems okay with it. No ranks down here, no masters, just people laughing. You grab a wooden cup of cider and sit beside a stable boy named Jory. He offers you a chunk of bread that may or may not have hit the ground first. You eat it anyway. He gestures to the sky. Clear night, he says. No ghosts, no wolves, just stars. You both sit in silence for a moment, watching your breath rise. Then he adds, "Last feast, someone set the hayloft on fire." You glance at the bonfire currently surrounded by dancing, sweaty people and very dry timber. Should we be worried, you ask? He shrugs. Probably. Then goes back to chewing. Feast days weren't just indulgent, they were survival. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually. After weeks of hard labor, winter, cold, or grief after a death, you needed a moment to celebrate. And yes, even funerals were cause for feasts. You remember one such event? The old kennel master passed in his sleep. That night the kitchen roasted 2 whole pigs, and everyone, even the maids, got a bowl of stew with meat that wasn't just bones. People toasted to him between bites. One girl sang a song he liked. Someone told the story about how he once chased off a noble guest's prized hunting dog with a spoon and lived to brag about it. Grief here is carried loudly, publicly, then fed and danced away until the weight feels slightly less. Tonight is not a funeral. Tonight is something else. Maybe a noble's birthday, maybe a saint's day. You don't care. There's bread. There's warmth. There's a girl singing a love ballad while everyone pretends not to cry into their mugs. Later, you find yourself near the great hall's back wall, watching the nobility stumble out to find their beds. A few of them still wear feathers. One has a pie stain on his knee. Another is loudly explaining why swans are deeply philosophical birds. You don't interrupt. You just sit back against the cold stone, full and warm and exhausted in a way that feels earned, and you realize something. Feasts don't erase the hardship, but they balance it. For one night, no one's a servant. No one's counting pigs. No one's worried about rot or war or frostbite. For one night, the castle is human again. Just people. Eating, laughing, breathing, together. You're roused before dawn by the tolling of a solemn bell. Not the kitchen clangor. Not the training horn. This one's slower. Hollow. The kind of sound that sinks into your chest and stays there. Someone has died. In the castle, death isn't rare. It slips in through fever, childbirth wounds, infections, or simply the cold. But each loss still rings differently. This one echoes through stone and soul alike. You follow the quiet procession toward the chapel, where the castle chaplain stands waiting in a heavy robe, hands folded, expression unreadable. Today's loss. The librarian. An old man named Father Owen, nearly blind, stubborn as a mule, and in possession of more books than most towns. You only spoke to him once. He barked at you for mis-shelving a psalter. But you remember his voice, deep, steady, like he read Latin in his sleep. His passing is met with soft steps and hard stares. The steward leads the small funeral. The priest murmurs blessings. The choir, 3 children and 1 reluctant baker with a passable baritone, sings a dirge that trembles like a candle. Then silence. A grave is dug near the edge of the chapel garden among the yews and curling ivy. You take a turn with the spade. The earth is cold, stubborn, and flecked with roots. It fights you, as if the ground itself isn't quite ready to accept one more name. The chaplain's words float over you like incense, words about eternity, about light, about the soul's journey beyond walls. And then, unexpectedly, he tells a story. Once Owen told me he believed books whispered to each other at night, he says, voice hoarse. He'd sit in the scriptorium long after we slept just to hear them breathe. Said the psalms rustled louder on windy nights. A soft chuckle rolls through the mourners. It's not laughter, it's memory. In castles, the chaplain is more than a priest. He's advisor, confessor, sometimes even judge. He holds the keys to heaven and occasionally the cellar. He blesses marriages, forgives sins, and explains why eating pork on a Friday might still be forgiven if you were really hungry. You visit him later in his study. It's dark, wood-paneled, filled with the smell of wax and old paper. A few relics sit in niches, one a bone, allegedly belonging to a saint, another a splinter of wood said to be from the true cross. You suspect at least one came from a firewood pile. You say nothing. Historians still argue about the legitimacy of relics. For the medieval believer, though, doubt was dangerous. Faith meant hope. And sometimes that hope came wrapped in glass and gold, resting in the chaplain's hands like a bridge between worlds. You ask about his duties. He smiles faintly. Mostly listening, occasionally guiding, rarely sleeping. He shows you the Book of Hours, a personal devotional richly illustrated. Its pages are smooth from touch ink, fading where fingers have lingered too long. He flips to a page and points to a line, Domine dirige nos. Lord, guide us. Then he asks if you've confessed recently. You shake your head. He nods like he already knew. Later that day, he visits the lady of the castle. He carries a box of herbs for her incense and listens patiently as she complains about her dreams. You hear snippets. There were wolves. Again. And the garden was filled with teeth. He nods, soothing her with scripture. Whether she believes it or just finds comfort in the ritual, you're not sure. But either way, she seems lighter when he leaves. That night, the chapel glows with candlelight. A few servants slip in after supper, not for a formal mass, just to sit, to think, to let the day settle in silence. You join them. The stone benches are cold. The air carries the scent of beeswax and thyme. On the altar, a small loaf of bread has been left beside a chalice. The chaplain calls it the poor man's supper, a token for the soul of the departed in case he's still lingering a little lost on his journey. You find that idea oddly comforting. Castle religion isn't all incense and Latin, it's woven into the bones of the place. Crosses carved into door lintels, candles lit for absent sons, rosaries whispered in kitchens, prayers muttered before archery drills. It's not showy. It's survival. Faith here is less about spectacle, more about structure, a rhythm to follow when everything else breaks. You think about Father Owen's books, now silent. The Psalms no longer rustling at night. But you also notice something. Someone lit a candle beside his chair in the scriptorium. Someone laid a quill across his favorite page. Someone, probably the same boy he once scolded, made sure the room stayed warm. You smile. Even gone. Owen whispers. That night the castle sleeps unusually still. No dogs barking, no doors creaking, just the wind outside pressing gently against the chapel walls. You close your eyes and listen. You wake to shouting, not alarm, not fire, just drama. Turns out someone stole a loaf of bread, not a large one, not a banquet centerpiece, just a small, cracked, stale hunk intended for the kitchen staff's midday meal. And now it's gone. And the steward is furious. You arrive just in time to see a kitchen boy being dragged by the sleeve toward the courtyard, his eyes wide and his hands flailing in protest. I didn't take it, he yells. I swear I was with the scullery maid, doing what the steward snaps. The boy hesitates. That was not the right answer. Soon the court is gathered, not the royal court, the castle court. A quick, rough system of justice that's less about gavel banging and more about the steward asking questions until someone cries or confesses. You stand near the back watching. It's tense, uncomfortable, slightly absurd. A crowd forms a few kitchen staff, a board guard, a maid with flour on her nose. Everyone wants to see what happens next. Justice here is rare, fast, and usually personal. Castle law is layered like an overbaked pie. The lord of the manor has final say, but day-to-day punishment that falls to stewards Reeves, and on rare occasion, the chaplain if things turn moral. Punishments vary. Steal a knife. Stocks. Lie about your status. Public apology, maybe a shaved head. Steal twice out. Or worse, hand it over to the sheriff. And if you steal bread, well, it depends on who you are. Noble child swipes a roll. Mischief. Servant child does the same theft. Guess who usually gets punished? Historians still debate whether medieval justice was harsher than today's or just more immediate. No appeals, no court dates, just cold stone stern faces, and the hope someone in power thinks your story sounds right. You watch as the steward interrogates the boy. Where were you between lauds and breakfast? I was fetching eggs. With whose permission, I thought? You thought silence. Someone snickers. The steward turns to the crowd. If no one steps forward to vouch for him, he spends the day in the stocks. You expect silence. But then from the crowd, a girl steps forward. Maud. The laundry girl. Shy, silent, quick with her hands, and quicker with her exits. I saw him, she says. He was with me, in the south yard, fetching kindling. The steward eyes her. "You'll swear it." She nods. Slowly. He considers, then snorts. Then someone else stole the bread. The boy is released. The tension breaks. Everyone exhales. People shuffle away. Some roll their eyes. One mutters about checking the pig pen for breadcrumbs. You approach Maud later and ask why she did it. She shrugs. "He helped me carry the pail last week." Just that. In a world this strict, small kindnesses carry weight. The bread thief is never found. But the lesson stays. Castle rules were never just about law. They were about order. The illusion that within these walls things make sense. That behavior is shaped by consequences. That good people are protected and bad ones are punished. But of course it's more complicated. You hear stories whispered at night. Of a page dismissed after breaking a vase that wasn't his fault. Of a maid who vanished after refusing a lord's handsy nephew. Of a man who went to the stocks for impudence which apparently meant complaining about spoiled fish. Sometimes justice here is just a word with too much chainmail and not enough eyes. And yet there is a code, an unspoken agreement. Don't steal. Don't lie. Don't forget who's watching. You pass the stocks later that afternoon. Empty today, but not clean. The wood is worn from rain sweat and shame. A few initials are carved into the grain. Some are jokes. Some are prayers. One simply says, "I was hungry." You sit near them for a moment, then rise. You see the steward again in the corridor. He's not shouting now, just muttering about next week's food stores and how someone miscounted the carrots again. You realize he's not cruel. He's tired. He's holding together a fortress of chaos and hoping no one sees how thin the rope's fraying. That night after dinner, you catch the boy Tom offering Maud a lump of butter he smuggled from the pantry. She shakes her head. "Don't get caught," she says. "Next time I might not lie for you." But she smiles. He grins back. And you realize justice in the castle doesn't just come from rules. It comes from each other. You didn't notice the rats at first. No one does. Not until it's too late. It starts with scratching. Faint. Just under the floorboards. Then nibbled grain sacks. Droppings near the barley bins. A kitchen girl with teeth marks on her heel swears she stepped on one barefoot. Then someone coughs. Then another. Then the fever begins. You're not told it's the plague. No one says it out loud. But you hear the word whispered between laundry lines muttered behind hands scrawled onto walls and quickly wiped away. Plague. And just like that, the castle feels smaller. You're sent to help the infirmary, a stern woman named Agnet. She doesn't flinch when you describe the swollen lymph nodes or the purple rash. She's seen it before. Boil the water, she says, and keep your mouth closed when you're near the sick. The infirmary is a stone room tucked behind the chapel, always cold, always damp. Straw pallets line the walls. Bundles of dried herbs hang from the rafters, but they do little to hide the smell. Sweat, blood, vinegar, death. You spend the day changing linens, burning straw, wiping brows, and trying not to breathe too deeply. No one understands how it spreads. Some blame bad air, others sin. A few claim the cook's cat is cursed. One man says it's in the butter. You eat dry bread for the rest of the week. You learn quickly that when fear takes hold, reason packs up and leaves. The first death comes at dawn. A boy who just yesterday was teasing a pig near the moat. By dusk, there are 3 more. The chaplain prays without rest. Agnet mutters charms between Latin psalms. You're not sure which one you believe in more. The lord of the castle orders the gate closed. No one in, no one out. The drawbridge groans shut like the door of a tomb. Some say it's too late. Rats still slip through cracks. Mice nest in the walls. One bursts from a sack of grain in the larder and is smashed under a skillet before it can flee. No one cheers. It's too quiet for cheering. You hear people talking in corners. Leave at first light. Bribe the guards. Run to the woods. But they don't. Because where would they go? The village worse. The forest starvation. Out there the plague moves faster. At least here there are walls. Walls and prayers. Historians still argue how plague spread in enclosed castles, if isolation helped or just prolonged the inevitable. Either way, here inside the air feels heavy, like it's keeping secrets. You volunteer to deliver food to the sick. Agnet eyes you. You sure? You nod. You'll need this, she says, handing you a cloth soaked in vinegar and sage. Put it over your face. It smells awful. You wear it anyway. You enter the makeshift ward. Every cough is a crack of thunder. Every groan feels final. But you carry the food anyway. You whisper names you don't know. You place bowls beside trembling hands. You step back, then step out. You rip the cloth from your face and gulp clean air. If there is such a thing. Later, you clean the chapel. The candles are almost gone. No one's replaced the rushes in days. You find a child's drawing on the altar, a knight holding hands with a woman and a chicken. The figures are smiling. You don't know who drew it. You keep it anyway. That night, Agnet burns soiled linens in the yard. The fire smells wrong. 3 guards stand watch at the gate. One is coughing. You say nothing. Instead, you help dig shallow graves. The soil is stubborn again. Of course it is. Still you dig. You place stones. You whisper names. You whisper nothing. You whisper please. You wake the next morning and check your hands for spots. None. Not today. In the kitchen, the cook cries when she discovers her bread starter has gone sour. She sits on the floor and weeps into her apron. You kneel beside her and stir the stew. In times like this, the castle does not run on orders. It runs on people. On small hands doing what needs doing. On quiet kindnesses passed like candles in the dark. By the 3rd day, the spread slows. Agnet nods at you once. That's her version of hugging. Some say the wind shifted. Some say the chaplain's prayers worked. Some say you burned the right shirts. Whatever it was, the silence fades. Voices return. So does laughter, tentative, soft like a bird testing its wings. The drawbridge is lowered again. But no one rushes out. No one celebrates. They just keep moving, because that's how you survive a plague in a castle. You breathe, you work, you hope. You don't want to get out of bed, not because you're sick, because you're cold, bone cold, toe cold. The kind of cold that creeps into your breath and makes you doubt that warmth was ever real. Your blanket, such as it is more of a burlap suggestion than an actual barrier. You poke a hand out from beneath it, and the air bites your fingers like a hungry rat. You pull it back in. Think. Stall. Regret waking up. Winter in the castle has arrived. And if summer smells like dung and stew, winter smells like smoke and mildew and not enough smoke. You finally rise. Your feet touch the floor. Stone. Hard. Wet. Somehow wet. You stand quickly and shove your feet into stiff boots you left too close to the wall. They've frozen. That crunch sound. Not comforting. You step outside your chamber and immediately shiver. The hallway is lit by one sputtering torch that makes everything look sad. The window slits offer nothing but gray. The air smells like burnt wood and wet wool. Rushes on the floor have gone soft with moisture. Someone tried to dry them with hot stones. Didn't work. You head toward the kitchen. Not because you're hungry, but because it's one of the few warm rooms left. The ovens are lit day and night. The cook guards the heat like a dragon. If you're lucky, she'll let you stand near the fire for a minute. If you're unlucky, she hands you a mop. Today, you get the mop. And a frozen bucket. Excellent. In winter, everything slows. Bread takes longer to rise. Wood splits instead of bending. Fingers crack. Lips bleed. Everyone coughs. No one smiles unless their cup is steaming. And that's just indoors. Outside, the Bailey is a half-frozen mess. Snow has drifted unevenly, covering some spots, turning others into slush pits. The stables reek of wet hay. The pigs won't come out. Neither would you if you didn't have to. But people do. They always do. The blacksmith is still at work wearing 3 cloaks and a look that says he might hammer the next person who asks for horseshoes. The bellows creak slowly. Even the flames look tired. You pass a maid laying cloaks over a ladder. They're frozen stiff, standing upright like ghosts of laundry past. "Don't bend them," she mutters. "They'll crack." You nod. You saw it happen yesterday. The Lord's favorite mantle now has a tear the size of a loaf, thanks to someone folding it too fast. In the kitchen, you're finally handed a bowl of stew. It's mostly turnips and something pretending to be mutton. It's also boiling hot. You don't care. You grip the bowl like it's a holy relic and let the heat seep into your fingers. Next to you, a guard is toasting bread on a poker. "Still warm in the chapel," he says. But the mice are back. Mice, you've discovered, love winter, especially the food stores. They nibble through grain sacks like they're in a cheese commercial. You spent half yesterday plugging holes with cloth and the other half setting traps. You caught 3. They stole your bread anyway. Later, you're sent to fetch water from the well. This sounds easy. It is not. First, the bucket rope is frozen stiff. You have to beat it against the stones until it loosens. Then, when you finally draw water, it splashes your hands. You scream internally. The wind bites the wet skin until it feels like fire. You trudge back up the steps, hands shaking, jaw clenched. One slip on the ice, and you almost lose the whole bucket. No one helps. Everyone's busy surviving. Historians still argue whether medieval castles were better insulated than we assume. Some claim tapestries helped. Others believe they were little more than drafty stone boxes with fires that barely took the edge off. From your perspective, it's the second one. Even in the Lord's chambers, The hearth burns all day. And yet his breath is still visible when he speaks. His boots sit near the fire on a stand designed to keep them from freezing. The bed has 3 mattresses and a fur canopy. You've got a straw pallet and a prayer. Outside, the moat has frozen. The kids test it, carefully. One throws a stone across the surface. It skips once. Cracks spider out. Everyone gasps, then laughs, then runs away. The guards mutter about enemy armies walking across ice. No one thinks it'll happen, but still they set night shifts near the edge, just in case. At night, you huddle near the brazier in the hall with 5 others. Everyone's wrapped in cloaks, sleeves pulled over hands, boots off to dry. The air smells like wood smoke and feet. A minstrel tries to play a song. His fingers are too stiff. He hums instead. Someone passes around a skin of warm ale. You sip. It's sour and smoky and perfect. That's the thing about winter here. It's miserable. It's painful. But it's also shared. The misery pulls people together. You complain in harmony. You laugh through chattering teeth. You layer old cloaks over bad blankets and tell ghost stories just to stay awake. You find heat in the strangest places. A smile, a borrowed glove, the steam rising from a kettle you're not even using. And somehow you make it through the night, wrapped in too little, warmed by too much effort. Still here, still breathing. Because in a castle, winter doesn't ask if you're ready. It just comes, and you endure. Together, you wake to fanfare. Not horns and parades, but the clattering kind boots on stairs, horses in the yard, servants running in every direction with panicked eyes and flowers still on their faces. The king is coming. No warning, no letter, no velvet carpet parade of heralds. Just a dusty rider at dawn shouting from the drawbridge. His Majesty approaches. And suddenly the castle you've been living in, grimy, drafty, proudly practical, has to pretend it's the jewel of the realm. You're handed a broom. Then someone takes it from you and hands you a chicken. Why? No one knows. You follow the current of panic into the great hall where the steward is barking orders like a ship captain caught in a hurricane. Scrub the tables. Unroll the tapestries. Tell the cook no boiled eel. Not after last time. Apparently, the last royal visit involved food poisoning and a minstrel who sang the wrong family name. He was thrown into a barrel for 2 days. You help hang banners no one's dusted in 3 years. One has a bird on it. You're not sure if it's supposed to be a falcon or a turkey. You hang it anyway. The cook is losing her mind. You know this because she throws a ladle at a page for asking what time the goose is supposed to curtsy. The ladle misses. Barely. The stables are chaos. The king's entourage includes 30 horses. 30, most of which are picky. One refuses hay unless it's soaked in wine. Another wears bells. The stable hands are cursing in 6 languages, and the king still not here. But when he does arrive, it's thunder on the drawbridge. Trumpets this time. Real ones. Shiny. Loud. Everyone flinches. The steward nearly swallows his own ledger. The king rides in at the head of the procession, smiling faintly, dressed in furs and brocade, and that look that says, "I own this place, and might also forget it tomorrow." He's followed by nobles, scribes, guards, musicians, falconers, and one very nervous man holding what appears to be a live swan. The castle bows, deep, and holds its breath. The king dismounts. The lord of the castle bows. Words are exchanged, flowery, formal, probably rehearsed. You don't hear them. You're too busy noticing how everyone suddenly walks slower, talks softer, and tries not to sweat through their doublets. The king is led to the great hall. He nods at the tapestries, smiles at the hearth, declares the bread passable. The steward exhales so hard you feel it across the room. Then comes the feast. It's not a meal, it's a performance. Dishes roll out like soldiers, pheasants stuffed with nuts, whole trout decorated with parsley eyes, pies so elaborate they need scaffolding. A tower of candied fruits nearly collapses. You catch it. Barely. You are now the fruit boy. It's a promotion, you guess. The king barely eats. He nibbles, he nods, he murmurs praise, but mostly he watches. Everyone. Everything. He's not cruel, just careful, measured. Like a man who knows how power moves and wants to see who notices. You do. He speaks to the steward, to the chaplain, briefly to the cook. He asks the blacksmith about the gate. He asks the cooper about the barrels. He even oddly asks one of the scullery maids if she likes the taste of the water here. She says yes. He nods, then looks at the steward. Keep her on, he says. She's crying within the hour. Not because she's afraid, because she knows what that means. Security, safety, a place, just from one moment. That's the strange magic of a king's visit. It exhausts, it panics, it drains the castle of every egg scrap of meat and inch of sleep. But it also changes things. Rooms get cleaned that haven't been touched in years. People get noticed who never thought they would. By sunset, the king retires to the Lord's chamber. The guards settle near the doors. Servants collapse wherever they can. You find yourself sitting by the hearth with 3 others. No one speaks. You just watch the fire flicker and let your shoulders drop. The castle survived the visit. Barely. Tomorrow the king will leave, and when he does, the castle will exhale again. It will go back to the dirt. The noise, the hard bread, the gossip, the smells, and you'll go back to chores, to frozen buckets, to rats. But for one day, the castle pretended, and for one moment, you did too. You belonged to something bigger, and now the fire burns low, and the hall grows quiet, and you close your eyes, just for a bit. You've earned it. The torches burn low now. Their light softens, no longer casting sharp shadows but warm halos that flicker gently against the stone. The rushes on the floor are quiet beneath your feet. The hum of voices has faded into stillness. Even the dogs have curled up and stopped pretending to guard anything. You walk slowly through the halls you now know by heart. Each corner, each stair, every groove in the stone once foreign has become part of your rhythm. A place where you worked, stumbled, laughed, and learned to endure. In the chapel, a single candle remains lit. The air smells of wax and time. You pause just for a breath and let the quiet settle around you like a heavy blanket. Outside, frost gathers along the windowsills. The wind whispers past the battlements, brushing the stones like an old friend saying goodbye. The stars hang low tonight, watchful, steady ancient. And the castle, it sleeps, not perfectly, not peacefully, but resting. The blacksmith's tools lie quiet. The chambermaids are folded into their pallets. The guards yawn between shifts. Somewhere in the loft, a kitchen boy dreams of a stew that never boils over. And you find your blanket again. You lie down. The straw creaks beneath you. You pull the rough cloth up to your chin, close your eyes, and let your breath slow. This place, this loud, cold, aching, beautiful fortress, has held you through another day. And it will hold you through the next. Sleep now. Let the stone walls fade. Let the wind hum its lullaby. Let the fire in your chest glow gently in the dark. You are safe. You are home. And the castle will still be here in the morning.